Hello and welcome to the Powerfish Podcast. I'm Ben.
And I'm Fish. Today we're going to look at the existential crisis Iceberg. Everybody's had an existential crisis, I'm sure. Who am I? What is that? Where am I?
Why am I here? Stuff like that.
So Ben, you found this online.
Yeah.
And this spoke to you in
There's a
in
Reddit
number of
post.
ways.
There's a Reddit post about this on everybody knows the concept of iceberg lists, so to speak, where at the top of the iceberg, everybody knows this thing, or everybody's experienced this thing, or it's super common, whatever, top of the iceberg. As you get to the bottom of the iceberg, it's more like, this is niche, no one's experienced this, or this is super crazy, or everybody, or no one knows this type stuff.
You see them a lot within like communities of like how deep in a hobby or community you go.
Right. How engulfed in like a niche that you are.
Yeah.
Like, and this is just the same thing, but existential crises.
Yeah. And much like those ones you see with niches and communities and hobbies, the further down the list you go, the more stuff just looks like it's made up. It really just gets, it's kind of crazy.
I mean, in a way you could say this is all made up, but you know, let's start at the top, not even at the iceberg. Everybody knows this. Existential crisis number 1. Everyone has their own complex life. I mean,
sure.
This is something that you first start to think about in like your early teens, maybe, I would think. And it's sort of the realization that you're not the main character, type of thing. It's if you didn't exist, life would go on. Everybody you walk by, everybody you see, all of them have lived many years full of experience, and it's just hard for one brain to really comprehend the level of just the level of life, the amount of life that has been lived. And it's frankly impossible to comprehend all of it, because I mean, I think as time goes on, it is ever more increasingly asked of us to feel ever more emotional about ever more things. Like, for example, as time of recording, the LA fires are going nuts.
Right.
And it's like, there are some people on the internet that if you do not, us in the Midwest, several hundred miles away, if you do not literally cry over what is happening to these people, then you are insensitive and terrible. And it's like, at a certain point, yes, all those people with their own complex lives over there, or in any tragedy, really, you only have a certain amount of capacity, and 90% of it is, for better or worse, allocated to yourself.
Right.
So the realization of everyone has their own complex life is just sort of at least when you maybe first realize it, first think about it, it's kind of that kind of hits you type of thing. But like I said, anyone in their mid-teens and beyond knows and understands that entirely well.
I feel like if I can really think about in my past, I can kind of get back into my old, like, younger teen, like 10, 12, or whatever, that in that range. I can get back into that mindset and think about how I thought about issues in my head. And it really was self-centered in a lot of ways. I think everybody around that age is the way it is. For me, and I don't have any specific examples, I don't remember, but I feel like when that really started to leave an impression on me, the idea of other people's complicated lives, it's when you really first hear about like a personal close friend or family member like having an issue or a tragedy, And then it's just like, oh wow, I have no way to relate to this. This is completely separate
Right.
from me.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about like, and you do relate it to yourself. Well, how would this impact me or whatever? But it's something that is totally beyond yourself that you can't be self-centered about.
Right.
I feel like
So the indirect exposure to somebody else's tragedy makes you think, or maybe direct exposure to somebody else's tragedy, really, that you can't relate to.
Something that like you brought up the LA fires, and we don't live in LA. It's something that you can't escape from somebody else's tragedy, as an example. It's not something you can just turn off the news.
Right. Yeah.
You're living in the midst or experiencing by proxy the pain of another person. Right.
And that's what I was describing is I think the amount of emotion required of people that are unrelated to this situation is ever increasing from people on the internet. And I don't think that this is most people. We can acknowledge the tragic identity of something and conceptualize that. But for like, I've actually been accused of this before, if we don't experience the same sort of emotion as if we are the ones in those fires, we are perceived as being insensitive in a way. And I think that's ever more increasing on the internet.
I guess I don't see those accusations as much. Maybe I see, like, obviously you go any time a tragedy happens, you see the barrage of thoughts and prayers and just people saying that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I guess I haven't really experienced that.
Like it was really crazy during when George Floyd was killed. Like if you were unrelated to that and you didn't know much about it and kind of just like didn't care because it had nothing to do with you at all, you were perceived as quite an insensitive person.
Right. I mean, that's kind of, not to get too deep into like social issues and all that, but that was kind of what sparked or at least progressed like the Black Lives Matter movement. Right. And it was kind of an accusatory thing, like Black Lives Matter. And if you're not an active supporter, then you are a racist, which
then you're part of the problem.
I think there was gray area there.
Right.
Like
yeah.
For me, like I would absolutely never, if somebody was just like, do you think Black Lives Matter? Absolutely. Why? How could they not?
Right.
But that those sentences, that I just said, are not tied to a movement necessarily. They're just tied to how I feel about the world and races.
Right. Yeah, but everyone has their own complex life.
Yeah, we got on a bit of a tangent. That was
we got
to LA fires and Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, LA fires and George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. But I would say all those things can be interlinked to everyone has their own complex life, and we are not a part of it. But it can be, if you're young, quite an existential crisis to be hit by that fact.
And there are we'll get to it. I was just reading ahead a little bit. We'll get to it. I was gonna bring up the idea of like simulation theory and stuff, but
yeah, that's coming.
We're gonna get there.
So the next one on the very top of the iceberg is worry about future.
Is that really necessarily an existential crisis?
I think there is a point in your life, again, also really young, when you realize that you can't just do what you want all the time and realize that you're not going to be this age forever. And there's going to be steps that you're going to have to take to make sure you're not homeless and things.
Yeah.
And with the moment you realize that you're going to have to actually take actionable steps to provide at a time that isn't now is a realization that can hit. Again, I think this one's also pretty young because this is a pretty common thing among just about anyone we'll talk to.
Right. There's degrees to this, right? So it's like most people come to the realization that, okay, I need income. However I get it, I need income. And a lot of people, more the better, will come to the realization that, okay, I'm getting income now. I need to put some of that aside for my future. So, I mean, there's levels to this, like the realization of this. Either you don't provide for yourself at all and you're homeless. You provide yourself a little, but you have no retirement, so you work till you're dead, or you really try to focus on your future and acquire wealth and comfort.
And I would say all three of those are quite common in adults.
Right. Yeah.
So this worry about future one, maybe for some people, it's at the top of the iceberg. I think for some other people, it hits them probably really late, if at all.
Well, it's tough, man. Like, shoot, I want to play video games all day long and not go to work. Shoot.
Yeah, this one might not have even hit me yet because I still want to do fun stuff now.
Yeah, there's a big part of me that, like, I'm like, man, I gotta, work on my career, and I gotta, dedicate time to things that could generate income. But then it's just like, or I could sit in my
But Double
pajamas.
XP is on Black Ops 6 right now.
Black Ops 6 Double XP, sit in my pajamas playing some zombies. Like,
right.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe we'll grow up one day.
I don't know about that. All right, so we're deep. Those are the only two on the very top. We're going down a level. Next, we've got, he said it earlier, we got simulation theory. So everybody knows about this. That's why it's still so high on the iceberg. This is, on probability alone, we are in a simulation. That is the most logical conclusion to come to. And how the premise and conclusion of this is, if you concede that humans will get to a point technologically to create a simulation akin to humanity. Now, if they have gotten to that point, it will probably be in abundance of simulations, and those simulations can get to the point of creating simulations, and so on.
Right.
Therefore, the chances of us being in the one existence that isn't a simulation is far less probable than us being in the seemingly infinite amount of other universes that are a simulation. And that's simulation theory, basically, in a nutshell. Which, there are very smart, respectable people that fully believe in simulation theory, that we are in a simulation. And, there's no way to prove them wrong. It's one of those arguments. It's one of those, basically more of a thought experiment that there's nothing to be done about than it is an argument for a way of life.
Right.
Kind of thing.
So, okay, so maybe I misunderstood this. So when I read simulation theory, what I was thinking of was the argument or the idea that it's just us and everything else, including people, are simulations or a product of simulation.
But we're real?
Yeah. I've heard this idea of, like, I'm the real one and I am in a simulation.
Well, we'll get to that too.
Okay,
but that's not what simulation theory.
What
is.
I was referring to earlier is apparently what we're gonna get to in the future. So we're talking about this other thing. Okay,
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I haven't, even though it's at the tip of the iceberg here, I don't think I've heard of
that. Really? That we're in a simulation?
What I was just talking about, I've heard up, left, right, down, and center. I haven't heard of this iteration of a simulation theory.
This is the only simulation theory I know to exist. This is the simulation theory that when someone says simulation theory is what they're talking about, or what it means in philosophical land.
I guess I've heard the phrase "we're living in a simulation." Maybe it just hasn't been broken down. So okay.
So the simulation theory is premise one: humans will get to a point to create simulations akin to human life. Premise two: there will be abundance of them. Conclusion: it is more likely we are in one than the original world.
I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. What's to be done? What's to be
Exactly. This is another one of those. These are abundant. This is one of those sort of more of just a thought experiment that could be real and could be not real, but it wouldn't matter in our own life, at least up until this point. Like if the simulation shuts off, it'll matter quite a bit, or maybe it won't. We won't be here.
Much like with the existence of God, I would say to this, all right, prove it. You have the burden of proof on this, and there is no proof, therefore it doesn't matter.
But that's where the mathematical probability comes into. With those two, if you accept the two premise, the logical conclusion is the conclusion of we are in a simulation mathematically.
Assuming that other humans of a higher hierarchy of simulation, and including an original, created our simulation or the simulations above us.
Mm-hmm. If you accept the premise that humans have or can get to a point of lifelike simulation, and accept the next premise of the simulations, if they can happen, they likely will be abundant, just like any technology today.
Right. I can accept that, I think.
If you accept those two premises, the logical conclusion is there's going to be more simulations than real life. Therefore, just probabilistically, we're in the simulation.
I mean, at that point, I don't know. At that point, what is real life?
The first one? I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like that at that point, that concept just becomes muddy at that point.
Okay, but what if we're in a simulation, or if we are the first one right now, and we, in our timeline, get to the point of lifelike simulation, then would you again consider what is real life again? Or would you say we're in real life, they're not?
I mean, at that point, how can you prove that you're not in a simulation?
A simulation. If we, in our lifetime, if it happens, then I feel like I guess the probability of this would stay the same, but the believability, I think, would skyrocket.
Right. That's what. So okay. So the thing I have a problem with, right, is not that okay. So if there were simulations, there would be a lot of them. Sure. And if there are simulations, then, and let's say the simulations are as lifelike, whatever that means in this situation, as our simulation, right? If they're all this intricate and in depth, and everybody has their own whatever, and then yeah, absolutely. But is that possible? That's the question that I struggle
and
with.
If it would happen in our lifetime, the believability of it, I would just dramatically increase.
Yeah, I mean, then it would be a proven fact at that point.
That we're probably also part of a simulation if we can do it.
That simulations exist, and that more than likely we're a part of one. But is that possible? That's
but
my
right
question.
now, I don't think there's any point in wasting bandwidth on it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, all right, if you want to prove that, make a viable simulation like what we would be, and then all right, you got me. I'm in.
I mean, it's not like we're not on track for that, but it ain't happening. We're not close to it right now.
Right.
And this is still at the top of the iceberg. But if you were to be a person that were to take this, and I could absolutely see someone getting lost in their own head thinking about this.
Oh yeah. I mean,
This-
if full stop, you accepted this as fact, we are in a simulation. Why? I don't know. Why do anything? Why not do anything? Why abide by laws? Right? Why anything? That would be my conclusion.
Why anything? Right. Yeah. So I feel like if someone took this really to heart, it could cause an existential crisis. But we're still at the top of the iceberg. We haven't even gone underwater yet.
Right.
So moving on, next one is, why does anything exist? And this is honestly, I'm surprised it's this high up. The origin of things is, the most hotly debated topic ever. Is it divine? Is it something quantum?
This is a science and philosophical debate and religious debate, I suppose.
Right.
All wrapped in one. And that stress, and why it's here, that stress can cause an existential crisis.
Right. If there was nothing, why would you wouldn't expect something to exist?
Right.
When you describe, but that's the thing. We don't know if nothing has ever existed. We don't know if we don't know if there's an infinite amount of big bangs. We don't know. We've talked about this in previous podcasts. We don't know anything. We don't know anything about dark matter. We don't know anything about quantum possibilities. We know a lot about quantum, but not even close to the extent of knowing it. Like, there's so much about the building blocks of our existence that we know just diddly squat about. So the ability to answer why does anything exist when we don't even know if there was ever a point when nothing existed is just so far beyond human capability.
Yeah, we don't know.
Right
That's what I was going to say. We don't know what nothing looks like.
We don't know what nothing looks like, because when it says why does anything exist, that doesn't mean a universe devoid of matter. That would mean time wouldn't exist. It would be matter, space, nothing, including the most mind-boggling, at least for me, is the fact that time wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Because time in our own universe might not even be the same if other universes exist. Time in our own universe is different depending on where you're at. So just what truly nothing, we can't even comprehend that.
So nothing is not in this sense, right? Nothing is not just the absence of things. Nothing is absence itself.
Right.
It's completely devoid of all things tangible and things that we know.
All things tangible and intangible. Yeah. Everything, all concepts, everything. And I just don't think that is comprehensible to the human brain.
So to get back to the question, why does anything exist?
Right.
I mean, are you asking why are we here, or are we asking what is the purpose of existence?
I think this is just, why is there something instead of nothing? Why isn't there nothing?
Depends on who you ask.
That is impossible to answer with our capabilities right now.
Yep. Scientifically impossible to answer. Religiously
quite possible.
Yeah, from a religious standpoint, there have been ideas floated around for thousands and thousands of years but just like with science, there's no provability to any of that. So you just believe what you want, I guess, at this point.
Right. Yeah. The everybody, religious or not, is just as close to everybody else as to figuring out why there is something rather than nothing.
Right.
So again, I feel like this is similar to simulation theory. If you really stew over this, I feel like you're probably going to end up in a religion, probably, to be honest. But you shouldn't stew over it. I'm not saying you shouldn't end up in a religion, but you shouldn't stew over it because we
Yeah.
can't know.
You shouldn't end up in a religion. Get out of there.
Yeah. But again, existential level for most people, not very crazy.
Right.
So last one, above the water, we've got Acknowledgement of Death. This one, I would say most people probably don't ever think about this one until there is something terminal in their life to where they know they are going to die, if they even get that privilege.
So, okay, help me out here. So, acknowledgement of death. We're just taking those words face value. So we're only talking about just the act of acknowledging death.
Yeah, conceptualizing it, realizing it, thinking about it. We're not going to be here in 100 years.
I feel like, granted,
Maybe.
and I don't know this for a fact. I mean, I could die tomorrow, but at least face value where I'm at in life, young and dumb and full of you know what.
Mhm.
I got a lot of years left, right? But I still at the same time feel like I'm to terms with it in a lot of ways. I don't feel bad about the idea of death. If that makes sense.
I think it scares a lot of some people. It scares more than others because when you're dead, I think a lot of people have fear of there being an afterlife or lack thereof. I think more people fear the lack thereof part because when they're dead, it's gonna be about the same experience they had before they were born,
which is non-experience.
which is no experience, no perception. So like when you die, I hear people say like they refer to the world after they die as if they can still perceive it. As if
And then there was nothing.
Right.
I mean, nothing is. Again, you get back to the idea of what is nothing, and it's like people think it's just the absence of things.
Yeah, but they don't realize that it's not just the absence of things. You're not going on. It is pure absence. You're not thinking, you're not perceiving, there is truly the absence of anything going on after you die, presumably. Assuming there's no afterlife.
So here's how I think about death, not to get too real, but to get too real. I just think of it as a sort of finality. It's not like life is an amalgamation of experiences. And at some point in time, you have to put an end to experience. So death is just the end of those. I don't even know if that makes sense. But that's the way I think about it. There's no fear. There's no like the only fear, quote unquote, is experiences I didn't get to have, I suppose.
Yeah, but when you're dead, you're not going to be afraid of that. You're not going to be regretful of that.
Right.
You're not going to care about that.
Right. So what I'm saying when I say that is fear of death is not fear of death. If I have fear of death, it's fear of life that I didn't get to live. There is no fear of death to me.
Okay, yeah.
You know, it's just, am I missing out on something that I would have liked to have experienced? But even that, I don't. And maybe this is a product of me being young and not close to death theoretically. Maybe the closer you get to death, the more you realize that you didn't do as much as you wanted to.
And that would be harder hitting.
Yeah.
Once you get past an age that like you realize your best is behind you, that would be an existential crisis, I think.
Yeah. I would be existentially crisised at that. If I knew for a fact pretty much that the rest of my days are going to be suboptimal and there's not a lot I can do about it. Bro,
shoot, man. That sucks.
That's a rough way to go.
Right, that sucks. So, but I think it's important that we keep our finitude, at least think about it every now and again. I don't think it's good to pretend like you're going to live forever, which I think most people do. I don't think most people think about the fact that they're going to die.
Yeah, you don't think about mortality because why would you? But I think it's like you're saying, it's important to keep in mind the end, to know what you need to do now.
Right. Life is meaningless without finality.
A lot like worrying about the future or preparing for the future. You need to, in a lot of ways, prepare for death and make sure that you're going out knowing you lived the life you want to live.
Right. Yeah.
And then at that point, I mean, you hear about this, to put it this way. You hear about this a lot. Older people who are like on their deathbed and they're ready to go. Not because they hate their life, but because they know I lived a full life. You know, I have a lot of loved ones. Yeah, would love to stick around, but I've come to terms with the fact that this feels complete to me. Right. I've heard of, I don't know a lot of now deceased old people, but I've heard of that with older people who lived a very full life on their deathbeds. A lot of them are religious, so that kind of skews it, I think. A lot of them are hopeful for the afterlife.
That's the thing. That's another... there's a concept that I want to get into that we'll get into in a future one here in a moment. But yeah, I would say, the numbers of... But we can't say that that's a bad thing. No. The numbers of people being satisfied at the end of their lives increased by religion can only be a good thing.
Right.
Of course, religion, there's a lot more than just that comes with it, but at least that part is certainly an upside. Certainly.
It's a functional belief.
Right. All right, so we're going to go one level deeper. We're underwater now. Sympathy is created by self-pity. And this is I think what this is getting at here, is evolutionarily the only reason we have developed the ability of sympathy is because it's advantageous to us. Because evolutionarily, natural selection doesn't care about anybody else than itself or us. The process of natural selection, I should say.
Right.
So the only reason we would have something like sympathy is because of us. And honestly, we've kind of driven this over the last 5 episodes or so. We've kind of driven this concept into the ground of what we came to in the last episode, the conclusion of we don't think it's possible to be 100% altruistic.
Right.
And this existential crisis of sympathy is created by self-pity, reinforces that. So we won't need to stick on this because go listen to our last episode and a couple episodes before that with Jimmer.
We talked about this concept, I believe, if not more, but I believe off the top of my head, 3 different occasions on 3 different episodes.
Right.
We talked about it on the last one with Jimmer, and then we brushed on the topic. It might have been in the philosophy episode, the long list of philosophy questions I went through.
So we've gotten this, we've drilled this one into the ground. Evolutionarily, we can't be sympathetic 100%. The only reason we have sympathy is because it's advantageous to ourselves.
I believe
it's selfish, and we are pure selfish beings. But as we have described in much detail, that is not all bad.
Yeah, I'm on board with that, I think.
Right, yeah. So if you begin to realize that, I don't think that that's a very big... If you're already a subscriber of evolution, this is not that revolutionary. Right. So I don't think this one's very... crises like, but
no, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, okay, so let's say that's true. the outcome is still
Right.
positive. So it's like,
life has been happening for a lot of years just fine
yeah,
as purely selfish beings. So
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
exactly. Exactly. All right, next one. We are not alone. Now, this is the one. This is just basically similar to simulation theory. The probability of us being alone in the universe is highly, highly unlikely.
Right.
Even if the beings are similar to us. If they're not similar to us, Bob, like, game on. They could be freaking everywhere and we would have no idea. But even being similar to us, there is one Earth-like planet for every 10 star solar systems. So if there's one Earth-like planet for every 10 stars on average, and there's 4 billion stars in just our own galaxy, that's already a lot. And then there's 20 trillion galaxies. No matter how improbable you think the origin of life may or may not be, it's pretty dang good chance that it's happened somewhere else. Even on Earth-like planets. And that is excluding beings that could have evolved completely unlike us, like without the need for oxygen and things like that. So the probability of us not being alone is, it just blows out of the water the probability of us being alone.
Here's the only way that I think you can dismiss this idea, and that's through religion. That's the only way.
The idea that we and Earth and the sun is created special, and there's something special about us, and that we are unique. That's the only way I think you could confidently deny something like this.
Right. Yeah. From a religious mindset, if you come up to somebody religious and say, well, do you think there are aliens? They're probably going to say no, because why would there be?
God created us special.
Yeah. We're his little people.
Right. In his image.
Yeah, from a scientific standpoint, assuming we're going to believe evolution is a thing, which most scientists do, then you would have to come to that conclusion. I would 100% agree with that.
Right. Which, again, based on probability alone, similar to simulation theory, it just makes probabilistically the most sense that we're in a simulation, and also we're not alone.
Well, I mean, this whole not alone aliens thing, I think it's made all the more. I would say compared to simulation theory is even more probable because we are seeing evolution on our own.
Right, and there's not a premise of we will get to a point of lifelike simulation that you have to first accept to then accept the conclusion. This is just reality as it is right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, we are not alone. I don't think that's that big of an existential crisis moment.
If this could be above the water easily.
I was going to say, yeah, this should be above the water, I think, because this is, no one's going to get their mind blown by, especially once you give them the statistics of the universe and just the sheer quantity of planets in them. Yeah, and I said at the very end there, 20 trillion galaxies in just the observable universe. Like, that's just as far as we can get in a small portion from what we know of what could be even more universe. So just the probability of life is just abundant. So that's that one. Not that existentially crazy, I don't think. Same level, we have, this is a fun one, last Thursdayism.
I have heard of this, but I don't know much about it.
So this is the idea that the entire universe was created last Thursday, which would be a week ago today. And this This is more of a parody of young Earth creationism and kind of a joke to make fun of it because, like, obviously with young Earth creationism, they think the Earth is, I think, 10,000 years old or younger,
Right.
6 to 10,000 years old. But there are obviously things that are older than that, like looking at the nearest star being a lot more than 6 to 10,000 light years away. Just you're looking into the past. You're looking into further than young Earth creationists think the universe has existed. So there's that. There's just things like mountains and stuff on the Earth that also has obviously been around for longer than 10,000 years. And the whole idea is that God created it all with age built in.
Right.
Why he would do that, your guess is as good as mine. But
test your faith, bro.
Right. Maybe it's to test your faith. But this whole idea of last Thursdayism is the universe started last Thursday. You can't disprove it. You can't say that didn't happen in the same way that you can't say young Earth creationism God didn't create the universe with age built in. So that's the concept of last Thursdayism is it's not so much a actual thought experiment to be considered as it is a parody from what I've understood it to be anyway.
Yeah, I think in order to be a young Earth creationist, and I'm just going to dunk on people, and it's not my intention to judge, but it is my intention to say factual things. You have to just disregard science.
You do. At this point, you have to disregard carbon dating. That's an accurate process that we've had. And listen, if you Google carbon dating fails, you'll find them because glitches and problems and mistakes exist. I think there was one where someone carbon dated a snail to like 200,000 years old, but it was still alive. It's like
It's crazy.
Crazy. And then they just take that and then they run to the freaking hills with it. Like carbon dating doesn't work. Yeah.
Hey, here's my thing, right? With the whole excuse of, God's doing this to test your faith, or it's whatever. Okay, what's the point of science then?
Right.
If you have a God that is going to intentionally mess with your ability to understand your own world, why are we doing any science then? Why don't we just thump our Bibles for a while and see what happens? I don't know.
Right.
I did,
But you know the moment a highly respected scientist would publish a research paper in support of something like creationism,
right,
that they would go flocking to science then.
dude, they would print that article or whatever,
Right,
that study out, and they'd hang it in their living room.
Science, right. That's how I always thought of young Earth creationists. The science is sick when it's in their favor, but it's simply a test of faith when it's against their favor. So, and that's what last Thursdayism is.
You and I don't know everything, so if there are young Earth creationists watching this, get in the comments, bro.
Feel free to convince us.
This is a what do I want to say here? This is an open thoughts forum here. We want to hear your thoughts, even if they're dumb.
Yeah. Post them. We're open to being convinced.
Yeah.
If possible. We go where the evidence goes. We'll just say that. All right. So that's last Thursdayism. Again, I don't really think that one should be taken seriously as a true existential crisis, as it is, I believe, intended to be a mocking parody. All right. Same level. Haven't gone any deeper. We've got Afterlife Skepticism. So this is only an existential crisis, I believe, if you are from religious upbringing, probably. Because if you are an atheist, you don't believe an afterlife exists anyway, or at least there is certainly no evidence for it. So
I mean, deconstruction in general is an existential crisis.
right. And I think this is just part of this. This is one file that comes along in the folder of that existential crisis of deconstruction. So, shoot, I said earlier that I'm going to hold this. What was it? What did you say? What were we talking about where I said I wanted to bring this up later? Something about afterlife, but I can't. I don't know. I'll probably remember it later on. But yeah, the idea that the afterlife doesn't exist, like we were just talking about it earlier, there is not going to be. You're not going to perceive nothing. You just simply won't be perceiving anymore. And I think that is much more an existential crisis for somebody of religious upbringing, like ourselves, honestly.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about, like, you and I both, quote unquote, deconstructed. And I was just thinking about, how did I feel about the afterlife before?
I was quite... So it was pretty easy for me to dismiss the religion part. I dismissed the religion and the following God part before I dismissed, because I was also grown up young earth creationist. I dismissed the religious part before I dismissed the Bible being true part. Later on, I realized and dug through more evidence and actually started educating myself on the science of today and realized that it just is simply illogical to believe young earth creationism anymore. But the hardest part for me, the last little string for me to get rid of was heaven and hell, was the afterlife. I was still really freaking afraid of going to hell. Really, specifically the evangelical Christianity that I was raised up in was really good of making you not want to do what I did because you're going to go to hell. It's a really good way to keep you in. So the concept that allowed me to move on from that fear was, I can't remember. I think I saw it on a YouTube video or something, but it was the idea of somebody else not being afraid of hell for the same reason that I was not afraid of going to Islam hell. Because I just simply didn't believe it existed, and I'd never considered it. And to the atheist, that was how they viewed my concept of heaven and hell. And I'm like, duh, why didn't I think of that? Like, and that kind of allowed me to finally get rid of the sort of fear monger that hell was kind of indoctrinated into me at that time.
Right. So when I was deeply, deeply involved in the church, I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, and it was years that I was in the church, I really just didn't think about heaven and hell that much. And I know that's like one of the motivating factors for joining a religion is securing your afterlife or whatever. Right. But I just never really thought about it. I was always more engrossed with like the day-to-day operations of an evangelical or the philosophical implications of God. That was my niche in religion. I never really thought about the afterlife, maybe because I was younger and I had no worries about the future. Maybe
you haven't hit that existential crisis yet.
And I just didn't think about the afterlife because it was just like, well, okay, this is an aspect of my faith, but whatever. So I guess through my deconstruction, it was more just like, okay, if I'm getting rid of all of this, that's going too. Wasn't too much thought there.
Yeah, I wish it was that simple for me to just get rid of it in one clean package. But it was. Well,
I'll say
it was quite gradual for me.
I'll say this about my deconstruction because I was deep in the faith. I was in that church building probably 3 to 5 times a week, either teaching or learning myself. I was deep involved. There was a gradual aspect to my deconstruction, and it was more along the lines of my own personal version of meditation and deep thought and research, and kind of just the coming to grips with that idea of no God in general. And then the idea of, if not God, then what? How do I feel? And then just kind of pushing myself into new boundaries through religious boundaries that I had set for myself, and kind of seeing where I shook out to. That was my gradual. But I guess the idea of an afterlife, it was just like, once I dealt with my personal conflict with deconstruction, once that idea was through, the rest of it could go. I was out of there.
Yeah, that's interesting. The afterlife part was definitely the hardest part for me to get rid of.
Indeed.
So, but like I said, coming from a religious background, I'd say this can be quite an existential crisis. But if you were raised atheist or raised or deist or whatever, just a belief that did not believe an afterlife existed, this is not even close to an existential crisis. This is just what you were raised with.
Right.
So again, pretty low level, I would say. Last one of this tier, you are alone in your brain. So this one is the idea of consciousness being in your brain. It's like the idea of you are a person and like sitting in a chair in a room, and you have a monitor in front of you, and the monitor is your eyes, and you have a speaker to your right and left, and those are your ears, and you have just somewhat like your chair allows you to feel, but in your brain, you're alone in there. And if you lose your monitor, if you lose your sight, and then if you can't see anymore, you're still alone in there though. But if you lose your speakers, those go out. Then you lose your hearing. And then if you lose your feeling, and then slowly you start to lose every single perception you have, and you're still alone in your brain. There's no one else there with you. And this is sort of a concept of death, but not consciousness death, a sort of brain dead state. And the idea of you being alone in your own brain makes some people uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was just, what's the crisis there?
I'm not really sure with this one. I don't really get the part where that is an existential crisis. I guess I could instill fear of being alone.
So okay. So I can understand from the perspective of, that sounds awful. Sure.
Right.
Just like, just for the same reason that I don't want to go climbing through caves, because you hear people getting trapped in them frickers.
Right.
It sounds awful, but it's not necessarily a crisis thing. It's just more of like dang, I really don't want to have that happen to me.
Right. You're alone in your brain, and if you lose all of your tools around you, you're still going to be there.
Let's just unpack that first bit of it. You are alone in your brain. Sure, nobody else is in there. And I guess that if you can extrapolate that further, that if you lose your senses, you lose your kind of connection to, at that point, others. Mm-hmm. Sure. But again, I don't know how that's necessarily an existential crisis, more just a fear.
Right. You don't have to fear being alone in your brain as long as your monitor and your speakers and stuff still work.
Yeah. I mean, if I got to that state, I'm sure there's a large part of me that probably would just want to not live.
Right.
But,
yeah. Would you even want to be, like, there are some people that are born without several senses, without being able to speak, right, hear, see, smell. I don't think it's very often they aren't able to feel.
Yeah.
But
I mean, unless you have literally every single sense completely cut off from you in every single way, you can connect to the world somehow.
right.
And maybe a limited capacity, but you can connect. And you can
If
make
somebody was
experiences.
born with no senses, what would they think? What would the person that's alone in their brain, would they know
think?
how to experience fear?
I don't think they would do much thinking, if I'm being honest. There would be no,
Like if it's someone with no ability to see, hear, feel, smell, speak, no, like if someone like that grew to adulthood, that would be the true definition of them being alone in their own brain. They have nothing.
Here's the question that I have to present to you right now. Let's say this person, right? Are they conscious?
Well,
how are you? Okay, so consciousness is the awareness of oneself. How are they aware of themselves?
there's the argument of babies aren't conscious because they don't. In the same way, a cat doesn't know it's a cat, and it doesn't know that its brain is a driver of its body like we do. A baby doesn't know that either. So is a baby conscious?
If you're going to accept the reality that a baby isn't conscious, then somebody with no senses, regardless of age, is also not conscious. Because they would never learn that information. They would never know their position in reality.
But which begs the question as to what consciousness is. If it's something that is orchestrated by the brain, and if they have a fully intact brain outside of perceptions, where's the consciousness there?
To go back
go
back to your question of like, what is this person thinking about? What do they have to think about?
Well, there's the question of what do blind people think about, or what do deaf people think about that have never heard words and stuff like that. But if you don't have anything to go off of, some people think in shapes.
If you can't hear, then there are means to visualization, or you can think via symbols, or you can even read. If you can see, you can read. And you can think through words, right? If you wanted to, whatever. If you can't see, you think through touch, and how you can maybe not how you can't visualize the things you're touching, because what is visualization? But you can think about the way you feel touching an object, right? And it's more of an abstract thought, but you can think. But if you can't do anything, there is nothing to be thinking about. There is no I am uncomfortable, because what is comfort other than sensation of feeling?
Right. Yeah. And I'm not, or I'm scared, or I'm.
Yeah. What do you have to be scared
anything. Of? Right. You wouldn't know what fear is. That's such a. Man, if we were in like a dictatorship, I would say to the dictator, hey, you should run this experiment.
Try. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't think we have the capabilities of producing a perceptionless, a fully formed perceptionless human being. Maybe one day we will.
I mean, I would say, and this is a sad thing to say, I suppose, but I think that person is functionally brain dead. They're not literally, because their brain is fully functioning.
Right.
But like, how do you? I mean, you.
But here's the thing:
what is life?
A lot of our thought processes are determined genetically, and how we think is a lot to do with genetics, and then the perceptions of life are then slapped on top of that. So they wouldn't have zero basis of brain function, I don't think. Right. Because there is psychological brain function that is hereditary, 100%.
Sure.
So there would be something to. There's a there. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Whatever that means.
Yeah, but again, it begs the question that we can't answer. What are they thinking about?
Exactly. It's impossible to know. Very, very interesting thought experiment. Maybe sometime in the future, real experiment. When we can create something like that. Yeah, I don't know. But when you get to you are alone in your brain and start to think about stuff like that, clearly there's a lot of thought to be done there. Existential crisis, though, an existential crisis requires it to be relating to you, which I don't know how you would do that unless all of your sensors and your speakers and your monitor and stuff shut down, but you're still alone in your brain, which is unlikely to happen. So not an existential crisis level, I don't think, but we're also one layer underneath the water. Speaking of layers, we're going down deeper. We got nihilism. And this is a pretty common known thing. This is the idea of it's usually, honestly, I would say from what I understand in most cases, did you hear how many words I just said there without saying anything?
That was a lot of, you could write a book on nothing.
I could, yeah. This, to my understanding, is the period between transitioning from Christianity to atheism in a lot of cases. That's not what it is, but I think that's where it's most often experienced. It is the idea that nothing matters, nothing truly on an infinite scale, nothing really matters. What you do doesn't matter. Nothing on a cosmic scale, nothing matters. So like, why are we all here? It doesn't matter. We're just a cosmic mistake.
Sure, but here's the thing, and here's what I would say to a nihilist. So, okay, nothing matters on a cosmic scale. We don't exist on a cosmic scale.
No, we exist as a micro dot.
Right. So, to dismiss all of reality or parts of reality as meaningless because they are irrelevant on a cosmic scale is, I mean, it's stupid in my opinion, because we don't exist on a cosmic scale. Things matter to us.
Right. Maybe we will exist on a cosmic scale one day.
Right.
As
of the time of recording.
Right.
We don't exist on a cosmic scale. So the things that we do on day-to-day operations, whatever, how we feel, the things our behavior matters to us and those around us. And therefore they have value.
Sure.
Maybe not cosmically.
Right. If you want to take the perspective of Earth is an infinitely small, minute of an infinitely small, just iota of the universe around us. Sure. If our entire galaxy exploded, there'd be 19,999,999,000,000 more galaxies to worry about. So like, sure, if you want to take that sort of perspective, we don't matter. But I would say the same thing you did. That's not our lives. We don't exist on that kind of scale.
Especially if you start using this as an excuse, right? Or as like a justification for poor.
I was gonna say, honestly, just a justification for almost anything, really, I would say.
Yeah.
Nihilism is not a good one.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be nihilistic, even though you might want to feel that way if you transition out of something like Christianity, at least for a period of time. You shouldn't. Because it gets nowhere.
But I mean, to give credit to this iceberg we're looking at, I mean, if you truly fell into that trap of nihilism, that's a crisis.
Oh yeah.
You're in full crisis mode at that point.
I think nihilism at face value, if you are a nihilist, 100% existential crisis level. So I think this one is fitting where it is, about halfway down the iceberg. All right, next we have we are alone. So a couple tiers up, we had we are not alone. And I don't think that one was that much of an existential crisis. And I think this one is more fittingly quite a bit lower than that. Because if we truly are alone on the scale that I had mentioned before of 20 trillion galaxies, if we are truly 20 trillion observable galaxies, if we are truly alone, that is almost more frightening, more scary.
Yeah, that is, just thinking about that for a minute, that is a frightening thought. To think about the sheer enormity of existence and to just be completely, a lot of ways it feels helpless.
Truly, yeah.
In a lot of ways.
If you look at the universe on that kind of a scale, you're going to get nihilistic about it, especially if we're alone.
Right.
Like, honestly, this one for me is kind of a frightening thought.
Yeah.
The idea that we are truly alone and that we're probably going to blow ourselves up and ruin it is crazy.
But we both accept the reality that we are not alone.
Right. We don't think we're alone because probabilistically we're not.
Right.
However, there is a counter to that called the Fermi paradox, which is, where are they? I mean, there's of all this abundant probability, surely one of them would have gotten developed to the point of being able to conquer nearby solar systems or galaxies, but we haven't seen them. So, like, where are they?
But granted, space is enormous.
Right.
Reality is enormous.
And we don't even know if time works the same between galaxies.
Right.
So, like, there's a lot of what if there.
So regardless of that fact, right? So we are alone.
You then can't argue that we aren't very special. We are, in fact, the most special in the world of 20 trillion galaxies with 4 billion stars, with an average of 10 planets per star per galaxy.
I mean, shoot, if we knew for a fact that we were alone in the universe completely, yeah, that might make me start believing in something. Because, I mean, that's just...
Honestly, dude.
That
would be... Seriously. That would be... That would be the biggest argument for religion I'd have ever known.
You'd start asking the question, like, okay, we are alone. We are the only ones out here, and presumably are going to be the only ones out here. Why?
Yeah, right.
What's our purpose?
And the thing, we are wondering. So there's a lot of science going on trying to figure out the origin of our universe. We know the Big Bang was a quantum event. We don't know pretty much anything before that. There's also, we don't know what the origin of life was. There's theories like RNA. RNA is something that can interact with normal matter as well as DNA. Maybe something happened where matter formed with RNA, created DNA for a single-celled organism off to the races. So there's theories. There's theories of how the first single-celled organism came to be.
Right.
But if we are truly alone, we are not looking for something that is probable.
Right.
We are not looking for something that we could believe happening. If this happened once in the scale that I just mentioned over and over again, the origin of life is a truly unimaginable scenario. So it would not even be worth the time of trying to figure out how it may have happened, because the probability of it happening would have been just uncomprehendibly low that we couldn't possibly know if that's what would have happened or not for the origin of life.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep thinking about this, and it's like, I don't know. I just don't think that's likely.
Me neither. It's a scary thought.
Let's assume that it is. Let's assume, or for the thought experiment, let's say it is true. Yeah, that's frightening, and I hate that, and that would invoke a very real existential crisis in me. But
If we knew it to be true, I think it would. But we don't think that it is.
But that's what most religious folk believe anyway.
Yeah, but
they have the backing of
I was going to say, they have the backing of a lot more to believe in than we do.
Right.
And that's why...
And here's the thing, right? With what I just said. I mean, so, yeah, a lot of religious people believe that we're alone in the universe. But my thought was, okay, if we're alone in the universe, what's our purpose? A religious person isn't going to question that. They know their purpose. They got a whole book about it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why you saying that if we are truly alone... I'm probably going to rethink this religious thing.
Right.
It really would make me think twice.
Because the next question is, okay, but why?
Yeah, because the probability, just the sheer unimaginability of life on Earth, but having never occurred before on the cosmic scale is just... like, there's nothing that can be closer to a 0% chance than that. Right. So, like, oh, man, you gotta believe in something. You gotta believe in something at that point. So, honestly, this one is a big one for me. The idea that we are alone is a quite frightening thought. Yeah. And I think this is a true existential crisis type of scenario if it were to be true.
Right.
So that's a good one. I think that's a good one. All right, last one on this tier, and we're gonna end it here because or end it after this one. That is because we're getting clear to time, and we are almost halfway through this. So we're gonna make a part 2 of this. So being born before immortality. So I don't think this has any business being on the same tier as We Are Alone or nihilism, but this is the idea that immortality is imminent. It's in our future, perhaps even our near future. And we might be one of the last or near last generations before it, which is kind of just like unfair. It's not very fair to us that we don't get it, but our next generation or 2 does. So this is just the idea of thinking about knowing immortality is coming, but I was born before it. But
or more realistically, you died before.
You died before, yeah. Honestly, that's a better way to say it. Dying before immortality.
Right.
This is something that, for it to be a problem existentially, to me, you have to hold the idea of immortality on a pretty high pedestal in your mind. And I don't.
Right.
And honestly, I don't think most people do. I don't think most people would want to be truly immortal, outlive the existence of the universe type thing. I don't think most people want that.
Right. I mean, I know I certainly don't. I was just talking about with the idea of death, with acknowledgement of death. I view death as a sort of finality, and like you said, death gives life meaning.
Right.
I don't think... Now, am I saying that I only want to get 80 years on this planet? Not necessarily. You know, if there was an option, assuming that I maybe hadn't had all the experience I wanted to have, to extend that maybe a little bit further, potentially. You know, assuming I'll be in good health for those extended years. But to truly be immortal, I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe the idea of defeating the aging body, I'm down with.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, either extending the amount of good years you have, or packing just good health and healthy bodies into the lifespan we have, great.
Like a true biohack.
Yeah, like because what that would be is those experiences that I'm talking about before the finality that is death are going to be only more rich, more abundant and more rich, because everybody knows that as you age, you can do fewer things, especially towards the back end, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can get to a point where that's not a problem, and you can be at peak or near peak performance towards the end of your life, and you can just continue to pack in experiences as if there was no issue, let's go. That's great. That's only good for humanity.
The way I see it, yeah. But there's also the argument of if things are experienced, if there's a shorter time span that you can experience things, generally the time spent experiencing is more valuable or spent in a more valuable way. If you go to the gym and you've got 2 hours, you might go in and check your phone every now and again, do a set, check your phone, take a dump, do another set. But if your gym session, if you're forced to 30 minutes, you're going to get, it's going to be efficient. You're going to get stuff done. We react differently on a timeline, on a shortened timeline. And it's usually almost always better when we know finality is imminent. So you could say that extending that reduces your quality in favor of quantity.
I think it depends on the person. I think there are a lot of people that could take an extended life and do some good with it, even if it's just personal good. I don't think necessarily, people are just going to be fucking about, so to speak. But that's kind of why I'm leaning towards the idea of, like you said, like a biohack. Not necessarily extending life, but just being able to be at peak performance through the time you have. Because that's going to just enable you to make the most of your time.
Yeah.
I think that might be ideal.
I think that would be ideal. I don't think the defeating death is the right thing for humanity, but I do think defeating aging could be.
Yeah. I agree.
So, but the idea of being born before immortality, again, I don't think this one has any business being on the tier of nihilism or we are alone, because both of those can be pretty hard-hitting existential crises. And this one, unless you really were looking forward to immortality, I don't think this one's that big of a deal.
Because you can't even say, because my initial gut reaction was like, dang, but I really want to see what that's like. But immortality isn't like anything. It's just the same same
more
shit, different day, as they put it.
Right.
And
except an infinite number of days.
Exactly. If you don't value immortality as a thing you want for your life, then the idea of immortality the idea of being immortal is more of a frightening thought than the idea of the
oh my gosh. Can you imagine if you're immortal, you live hundreds of billions to trillions of years, you outlive the heat death of all the stars, therefore there's no more light in the universe. And then you've got an infinite amount of more time to go after that.
That's hell.
That is hell. That is, yes. So I don't know if anybody wants true immortality.
Right.
So we're going to leave it there. We've got, honestly, a lot to go. We've got, just to give a little cock tease, we've got the mystery of consciousness. We've discussed that a lot. Dual consciousness theory. That one's interesting. Super determinism. Determinism, but on a quantum scale.
Yeah, we talked about determinism.
Right. Freaking quantum immortality. We're getting into some really deeper stuff in the next episode. So definitely stay tuned if you liked what you had to hear today. And if you didn't, don't. So we're going to end it there. You know what to expect for next week. We'll see you then.
See ya.